Our topic this time around is going to be on machine guarding, and as you can see there in the picture, we've come a long way, thankfully. But yeah, you can kind of see right here, besides the kids who are working and don't have any safety gear on, that they're working right next to this unguarded wheel and a belt system here that could potentially hurt somebody. Of course, you get your finger in there, get a loose sleeve or a necklace, even long hair, as we'll see here in a minute. All those things can get caught into there. So yeah, anytime you see a situation like that where you've got moving machine components and they create a pinch point, that's where it's kind of an obvious giveaway that there needs to be some sort of machine guarding there. And I do have a story back when I was in high school. My first job that I had, I was working in a meat market. And you can see here in the picture, this is a meat slicer, and this is a round blade, and it's almost as sharp as a razor. And they've provided a hand guard here and a handle, and that's, you move this sled back and forth, and that's how you slice the meat into the thin strips. Well, I was working with a buddy of mine, and he decided for whatever reason to throw this off to the side because it is on a hinge and you can move it out of the way if you want. And he went ahead and put his bare hand on this, and he was running it back and forth through the slicer. He wasn't paying attention and was talking to somebody else, wound up slicing the tip of his thumb off. So pretty preventable stuff, even though the machine guards are there. Now this next video, I gotta kind of warn you, it's going to be pretty rough, but this kind of scales that up, what we just talked about, to a more industrial level and what could happen potentially. Alright, so that's the real deal. And that stuff like that happens quite a bit, unfortunately, all around the world. So what is machine guarding? So that's any means of effectively preventing personnel from coming into contact with parts of machinery or equipment which could cause physical harm. And some examples that we'll look at here in a minute: barrier guards, two-man trip devices, electronic safety devices. But there's all sorts of machine guarding injuries: crushed hands, arms, severed fingers. There's just a long list of all the ways that a machine can chew you up and spit you out, and all the way up to death. And I think that last video that we saw, I don't think that guy made it. But machine guards and machine guarding is essential for protecting workers. And here's another one of those crazy pictures. Looks like somebody might have had on, this person might have had on a fall harness or something like that, and this is a spinning shaft, and this person was completely pulled into the machine and chewed up. And then there's the, if y'all don't have a policy that says people with long hair need to tie up their hair, that's exactly what could happen if we get complacent, especially around unguarded machinery like that. And see this every once in a while in the past 12 years I've been doing this. A pretty common situation is, even for a hand grinder like this, there's supposed to be a metal guard on the back end of this wheel, kind of like you see on this saw here. It's got a nice big guard on it. But those guards are also removable. Problem is, if that wheel breaks off at a high rate of speed, it could definitely come back and do some damage to you. But and even if you do have a guard on one of these grinders, you still need to go ahead and have on a pair of safety glasses and a face shield, just to be extra sure that you're going to be alright, at least as far as your face goes. So 4 types of guards: fixed guards, like you see there in the picture, interlocking guards, adjustable guards, and self-adjusting. And so we're going to go through each one. So fixed guards are a permanent part of the machine, and they're not dependent on any other part to perform the function. Usually made of sheet metal screen, bars or other material, heavy duty type stuff. Generally considered the preferred type of guard because they're fixed in place, they're permanent, and it's going to take a whole lot of work to pull them out and just throw them off to the side. But they're simple and durable, and as we're going to repeat this many times throughout this session, a machine's guards have to be in place before it can be used. There really is no exception, and red or yellow barricade tape is not an acceptable substitute. Interlock guards, you can see in the picture down there in the lower right, those on those doors there, those red parts, those are sensors that constantly communicate with one another. And if someone were to go and open that door to get into the machine, it's going to kill that machine as soon as those sensors separate from each other. Those aren't foolproof though, because like any other mechanical part, you know, that they can go out from time to time. And I've worked at places where somebody has pulled a plexiglass guard door, and the machine kept going because one or both sensors had failed at some point. So yeah, interlock guards connected to the mechanism that will cut off the power automatically, and they need to have a manual reset system so that the person can't just go back, can't shut the door behind them, and then those sensors come back together and that machine starts up again. So once that door is open, that's going to tell an operator maybe somewhere down the line, or the person may have to go back who broke the sensors and go back and get the reset going from the control panel itself. And yeah, something like this, especially in robotics, robotic welders and things like that, you can probably right about here is where the interlocks would be on one of these. And then we have our adjustable guards, and probably our most common example in the workplace would be some sort of a stationary grinder, like you see there. And they've got guards all over them between the safety glasses, the spark guards, the tool rests, the wheel guards. Those can be manually adjusted. They have to be checked before use because the wheels will start to wear down over time, and that gap between the tool rest will start to widen. So you have to keep an eye on those. And here's an example of an adjustable guard. And again, when I used to work at that meat market back in high school, we had one of these that we cut steaks with. And there is a saw blade that runs all the way through this machine. And this is just a metal piece with a thumb screw on it, and you can adjust that guard up and down depending on whatever you're working with. And then we have our self-adjusting, and probably the most common example I could probably think of would be a circular saw that you might have at your home. Common complaint though is a lot of times the self-adjusting guards can kind of get in your way, and people can't see what they're doing, and they get very tempted to remove those guards. And so that's why whenever we're designing machine guards, we want to make sure that it's as user-friendly as possible so that people aren't tempted to defeat the guard or remove the guard. So requirements for guards: they have to prevent contact. Guards have to prevent hands, arms, any other part of a worker's body from making contact with moving parts. And it has to be secure, so workers should not be able to easily remove or tamper with the guard. And they need to protect from having objects falling in, so the guard should ensure that no objects can fall into the moving parts. And sometimes what can happen is if it's a quickly rotating piece of machinery, something falls in, and if it hits just right, it can shoot right back out at the person who's operating the machine. And it shouldn't create any new hazards. Kind of defeats its purpose if you take care of one safety issue but you create another. And I've worked at places where they had guards that they wanted them to be bomb-proof, I guess you could say, and these guards weighed 30 or 40 pounds, solid steel, and people had to move them every day to do maintenance on them, and you start having people with hurt backs and things like that, you know, kind of fixed one thing but created another problem. And so they shouldn't create any interference. Any guard which impedes a worker from performing the job quickly and comfortably might soon be overridden or disregarded. So proper guarding can actually enhance efficiency since it can relieve the worker's apprehensions about injury. And another thing is if you're constantly having to lubricate a machine, a guard needs to allow you to be able to quickly and safely do that without having to remove the guard itself. And also keep in mind, guards should pass the auto principle, so you should not be able to reach around, under, through, or over and be exposed to any machine hazards. And it's the responsibility of all employees to report missing or damaged or inadequate guarding to their supervisor. And we never attempt to operate any machine that's unguarded, not properly guarded, or whose guards are not in the proper place. Doesn't matter if the supervisor is behind schedule on production. If you don't have a guard on there, don't run it. And we never wear gloves when working around the quickly rotating equipment. And let me see if I can get this video to play up. So here's our guy working on a lathe. So he's polishing up a piece of steel maybe. Got some sandpaper, some emery cloth. He's got long sleeves on. And watch right here when he gets up to the chuck and he gets pulled in. And these machines, they can be so incredibly powerful, almost incomprehensible. And this guy got lucky. He's stuck in a position, but I don't think he died like that last guy that we saw and the guy before that. Alright, so the fabrication of machine guards can be quite technical, so please submit any concerns around machine guarding to your supervisor or your superintendent so the requirements are covered if changes are to be made. Now here's some other examples of some machine guarding. I thought I'd put these in just so all of you can take a moment and think about your work environment and see if any of these options might be used at your facility at some point. If not now, then maybe in the future. I kind of like this. This is called a light curtain, and all those laser beams are communicating with one another. And if you were to stick your hand in there, it's going to interrupt those beams and it's going to shut off that machine. And then you see there in the upper left hand, two-hand tripping device. So in theory, you're supposed to have one hand on each button, and if you got your hands there in front of you, then you can't have your hand in that press up there. And that's all well and good, but what if we could take it even a step further and then put a light curtain in front of that and on the sides? So even if someone were to tape down these buttons and this were still on, hopefully they wouldn't be able to defeat this, but that would be able to stop them in that situation. Here's another thing that I like under emergency stops. They make these emergency stop ropes, and if you were to get pulled in or caught or in some sort of a situation where you have to do an e-stop, this runs all the way down the line. All you got to do is tug on that line and it activates your emergency stop. And then here is a weight sensitive mat. So you plug that in, and if you go to an area where you're just walking along, it'll detect that there's weight on that mat, and that's interlocked to the machine and shuts off the machine. Now, I've never seen these used in real life, but they are out there. And so folks who are working on presses or saw blades, things like that, those are physical restraints where if you're hooked in like they are, you can only get your hands out that far and away from any machine hazards. And you know, I've worked at several facilities over the years, and they used to make machines back in the 30s and 40s and 50s, and they really made them to last. And so it's not uncommon at all to go into a facility and see a machine that old and it's still running. Well, the thing was, the safety wasn't too big of a priority back then, as we saw from that very opening picture. But just because you have an old machine doesn't mean you can't go back and put new guarding on it. And there's companies out there that can do this for you, or can be done in-house. And here on this lathe, it looks like this is a hinged model here, and they've got their plexiglass all over the place, and you can flip that up. And you know, anytime you're operating a lathe, you're supposed to have a lathe, like a chuck guard in place. And the new ones that are out now, they're actually interlocked to the lathe itself, so that machine won't work if that guard is not in the down position and making contact. So yeah, if someone were to come along and push this guard up, then it should, in theory, kill that machine off. And then even things like this, for every type of machine out there, there's so many different options for machine guarding, from very simple all the way up to some really engineered stuff and complex kind of stuff. So the sky's the limit. Honestly, if there's something out there that isn't guarded, I guarantee you there's someone who is making a guard or who can make a guard for any particular situation. And so yeah, that's it on machine guarding. Thank you.